All right. It's 4 o'clock my time. I think we should get started. Nice and on time, unlike certain other briefings you might watch every day. Welcome to our live Q&A. If this is your first time joining us, I've had people send me a few questions, so I've prepared a little bit for those. As we go forward, you can write in the chat. We've already got a few questions there, and we'll cover those kind of as they come at the end. We'll see what makes the most sense. As per usual, I'm always nervous when I do these, so if you could throw in the chat if my audio is coming through and everything's hunky-dory, that would be great. Let's see. So we are still in quarantine. These have been a fun way for me to stay connected and be thinking about football and not everything else going on in the world. First things first, on that note, and I had this thought earlier this week, for you head coaches out there, if you haven't recently, might be a good idea to send an email, whether it's full program, whether they're separate emails, but probably to your parents and your program to let them know kind of overall what might be going on, if you've heard anything from your state organization or your school, or how it's going to impact summer practice, or just let them know, that you're thinking about them. And then even for you position coaches, maybe just shooting an email to some of your players in your position, let them know you're thinking about them, hoping them and their family are doing all right. I did that earlier this week and had some good responses. It's just one of those things as a coach. I probably don't need to ramble too much more about that. All right, so let's go to the first question. So this comes to us from Richard Welch, asking about what you would do with the outside linebackers walked up in a 4-4, and also wondering about the if-then play calling process. So if they're walking both outside linebackers up, that's going to turn this into almost like a 6-2. Now, depending on if they're right over the line, they could be trying to blood stunt. So if both of these players are coming in, that's, the first thing I would do against that's probably mid-triple. Are they doing it? Are they calling strength to a specific side is something I would try to check. Doesn't matter whether your formation is into the boundary or the field. That would be another thing to check. And we'll touch on this on your second part of your question. The first thing I would probably do is start playing with formations. So if you go over or you go trips and you split, right, maybe this guy comes way over here. They have to do something to account for this guy. So some teams will bring the corner over. If they do that, then you've got a whole lot of space to run backside. Otherwise, they might have to walk this guy out. So that would be one way to try to influence him. If they're not doing that and you're still struggling to get to the field, and you'll see Navy does this occasionally, bring this guy in, right? You could almost line him up like a tight end here, but depending on where that outside backer's playing, maybe you want him just right outside here and have him just crack this outside backer who's walked up, because then that obviously negates what he's there for. Another thing to do, let's pretend, we'll say we have our regular base formation. So that was over. Trips is something you can also throw at this. Split out that other backside A-back, and they have to figure out how they're going to defend this again, right? So I doubt most teams are going to bring this outside backer over to this side unless they truly play it like a 4-2-5, but I don't see a lot of high school teams doing that. They might bring the corner. Well, no, they can't bring the corner over because he's still there. So their only option is to either cheat this free safety over, and whether he's manned up with that outside receiver, he could be in a few different areas here. If I see this, I am running to the short side all day, right? So if that free safety is there, I'm probably looking here. This is triple left all day, right? So we can go there. We can come down, right? We can motion him. You've got that, right? There's your two guys. And assuming your wide receiver can block one-on-one on the corner, there's no one else there to make the tackle. If that's not the case, let's see. Good. My Control-Z is going to get rid of all that ugly hand drawing. The other thing they are going to have to do here is walk him out. If they walk him out, if they're still trying to get him to play the edge, right? If he's setting the edge and he's trying to force, there's no one else out here. I'd be running bubbles to this guy, right? Just have your X block the corner, have you run the bubble here. There's also a whole lot of space right here that you can play around in. Yeah, the world is your oyster at that point. Trying to think. Nothing else is really coming to mind as far as formations. Those are the two biggest ones, but always play with your splits of your X's and either put them on the same side or run trips. As far as actual plays, if you try to keep your game inside, right? So if they're out leveraging you to the outside, try to keep your running game between the tackles. I would run midline, right? Wherever you have a bubble, a B-gap bubble here, or excuse me, A-gap bubble. I'd want to run midline to this side. I'd want to run triple to this side. Zone dive, right? Depending on where those guys are outside, if they're truly contained and they're staying outside, running a zone dive or a QB follow right up that seam is going to basically nullify those guys, and you can keep hitting them inside until they adjust. Either bring those guys back, but essentially you just want to find where they're weak and keep pushing that until they're forced to adjust, and then be ready with the next adjustment. We'll talk about that as part of your second question. Another easy thing to do, you can run like a rocket crack or a mid-triple crack, right? So let's pretend, right, he's back over here. We'll cheat this guy in. You might call this, we'll call it trim, is what we call it at our school. Depending on where he is, right, you might line him up right at like a 3 feet, like a tight end. You could line him up at 3 yards here. And actually this becomes more of a switch. But what you can do, right, is then your X blocks there, your A back blocks there. And then especially if you switch these up so that linebacker doesn't know where the block is coming from, right? Sometimes he might be blocked out by the tackle. Sometimes he might be blocked by the A-back. Sometimes he might get blocked by this guy. Sometimes he might not get blocked at all. The more that guy has to think, because they're putting him in not a great position, the better off you'll be. Now, as part of the if-then play calling, I should say, hopefully that answers the question. If not, throw it in the chat. Or if anyone else has questions, throw it in the chat. If-then play calling. So everything in this offense, it's the thing that originally made me fall in love with it, is that for every situation, for everything that the defense is trying to do, we as an offense have an answer for it. So this is not Paul Johnson's if-then sheet. If you haven't gone to the Football is Life blog, I put the URL at the top. I might throw it in the description if I remember. But this is his if-then sheet that I've used and kind of learned from. If you go to the URL itself, he has actual reasons as to why each of these things makes sense. So the idea being, for formations at a really basic level, and this is what we were talking about a little earlier with the 4-4, if they're an 8-man front, you run over. Put those two X's on the same side and see how the defense reacts. Because there's only so many things you can do, and then based on that, you can always put yourself in a good play. Another good example of that is versus the odd stack. You see this at the high school level a lot. Obviously 3-3 stack or 3-5, depending on whatever you call it. But if they're 3 linemen have 3 linebackers right behind them at a base stack, running tackles so that you actually declare a strength and create an extra gap forces them to either have to adjust or they have to leave a gap open. Then the trick is to find where that gap is. So we talked about this a little bit last time. So the if, some of them are how the defense is aligned. Some of them is how they stopped the play previously. So I like to think about this that I want to run triple every play. And if I'm getting 4 or 5 yards of play, I'm going to keep running triple all the way down the field. Now, what gets me out of triple is if they have a 2 or a 3 technique to the play side. All right, then I'm going to run midline because that's where the bubble is. If you see how the defense is taking away your triple, right? If the handoff key turns his shoulders, if the pitch key is turning his shoulders, if you see that they're doing sky cloud force, some people might call that rolling coverage. If you see quarter, half, that the defense is cheating to the side that you're motioning towards. And essentially, this is one example of an if-then sheet. Sometimes it works really well, especially if you have a staff with guys who are in the booth who are watching certain things to tell you exactly what happened on the play before. So sometimes it's the actual rules that coaches go through. Other times it's more like the pirate code, more like guidelines, so that if you're like, shoot, I keep getting beat because of X, this is your next answer. And the idea is hopefully that answer keeps working until the defense has to adjust to that, and then you go back to running triple. So that's the basis of the if-then play calling. Again, hopefully that makes sense. So moving right along. So from Jake Orzati, again, maybe butchered that last name, hopefully not. Asking if we run belly, and if so, how you block it to a 2 or 3 man surface. And do we run belly option? So this is one of those times where I will say that, again, terminology can always change. Some people call things differently. Some people run things differently. We at the school I am currently at do not run belly in the sense we don't call it belly. When we run down G, however, which some people look to that as the same thing, let's see, do I have a good place I can draw some of this up? Let's delete. So we always run down G. Let's bring that corner back. So we always run down G out of heavy, right? So we're going to bring this guy in as a tight end. We're going to keep our A back in his normal position here. When we do this, let's see, 3-4, some teams do this, but essentially we block it a lot like zone dive, in the sense of everyone is taking a play side step, and if there's no one attacking their gap, they're going to look to second level. So everyone is kind of doing that same thing here. Well, I guess that goes for our tight end as well here. Most teams wouldn't give us this look, but just for the sake of argument. Oh, sorry. Man, I'm struggling. That's not at all what I want to do. I'm sure some of you are probably pulling your hair out either live or if you're going to watch the recording on this. For the sake of demoing this, I'll call... No one's going to give us that look. All right. That makes a little bit more sense. So when we are running our down G, we want to run, he's going to block down. He's going to block down. Our guard is going to kick him. And typically, we have our A-back come and try to hook him. And depending, again, this isn't exactly how a team would align on defense, but the A-back is either going to pin that backer in, or he's going to try to hit him straight up just enough to open up this seam. If we were to get something like this, I would imagine we would probably go inside like that. The idea is just putting your players in the best position. So hopefully that answers your question. And then with that, we are faking rocket here, quarterback reverse pivots like it's rocket, hands off to the B-back that way. That's our typical belly. We do not carry belly option. It is a very expensive play. Sorry, I think the question was belly option. So let's start with the first question. 2 or 3 man surface. Everyone's just blocking down. Down, kick out. If I was reading something as I was getting ready for this today that said if your guard was not able to pull, do I have a clean one of these? Yeah. So let's say we've got, forgive me here, hopefully I don't need these later. Let's say we've got a guy inside here, and we've got an end outside here. And we've got our heavy, so he's actually going to be an end. Let's say. So instead of having your guard try to pull here and make this a long, weird kind of block, which is tough. What did a coach call this? Called it T, was the tag on it. So T meant they doubled here, and then T meant their tackle just pulled straight across there to give you that look. So that's something you can play with when it comes to 2 or 3 man fronts or surfaces. We don't run belly option. It's tough. Ideally, from what I've seen, and this is me talking off the cuff on just after watching, Navy and Georgia Tech run it a lot. What they're going to do on belly option is basically everything's the exact same. It's going to be belly. They're going to block it like belly. This guy's going to come out like triple. You've got 1, 2. And then, let's see. Probably becomes more like a load because you could still pull the guard. You're probably better off letting your B-back take number 1. Your guard can loop around. And then your quarterback's going to pitch off of this guy, number 2. But I think it's a lot. I don't know what you get out of it other than it's a play off of down G. But it's an expensive install. Counter trap option. We also do not carry counter trap. We carry a regular counter option, like traditional counter option, and a QB counter, which also Navy runs. So instead, it's just the quarterback by himself with the guard and the tackle pulling back around the other side. Anytime you're trapping, that's a lot of moving pieces. Obviously, you have to trust your guard to be able to pull and do it right. We always worry that that's one of the few plays that we can get a pretty big loss on. if the defensive end plays it right and we don't get a good hook on him. So we don't run counters probably as much as we should, and definitely not counter trap. If you're not getting what you need out of counter, you're probably not getting it out of counter trap unless, let's see, maybe the middle backers are reading guards and you can influence them, but that might be one reason. So hopefully that makes sense. So now we've got how many perimeter tags do we have and what are they for each play? So I was trying to think through our different tags, and we don't have a ton that we carry. We have auto checks for our base blocking for whether they're supposed to arc or whether it's supposed to inside load. So the only real tags that we use are switch and crack as far as outside runs. We have some more inside with the A-back, like if he's folding in. Obviously stay if you don't want motion. But we went over this a little bit, I think, in the last Q&A. So if we're going to switch, like we like switch against any team that's going to run man coverage. So if these two are manned up, if we can run switch, that means, so like we could run this off of, say, triple, just triple right. So normally this guy is going to be number 2. So switch means that the X and the A are going to switch responsibilities. That's a really bad A, but pretend it's good. X and A. So why we like this against man is the X is going to release and go towards the free. The hope is that this corner goes with him and pins himself inside for a few steps before he realizes it's a run. And by that time, our A-back should be able to get outside and pin him inside there. And gives us a nice little lane. If he doesn't suck to the inside, he's going to get outside and just kick him straight out. So either way, we've got our nice little lane there. So that's switch on triple. You could run that on, if you wanted to do that on mid triple, you would need your X to come, right? You'd want to cheat this guy down. You could run switch like that. Crack. We like crack, especially out of over. Over or trips. So what? Sorry, too many things going on. I'm trying to think, right? So if we run our over here, normally we would have our over X is looking to free, but in this case, out of over, our crack basically becomes switch for the inside X. So then we can crack him there. And then instead of the A-back going there, there's the block, and then like that. Again, and forgive my horrendous like touchpad drawing. Hopefully a lot of this is making sense. So switch and crack. I'm trying to think of other tags you might run. A load or a toad. I think I talked a little bit in the last video. If you're going to influence who's blocking who. But those are the main ones. A lot of times we like tags week to week. So I'd say switch and crack are our main like everyday tags that we carry with us all season. And then typically if we see something on film with a team, if they line up a certain way or do something a certain way, we'll come up with our tags week to week. I don't have a good example of that for you. But hopefully that answers your question. And you can tag triple, you can tag rocket, you can tag mid triple, you can tag if you're running zone option and zone option kick, which I've gotten better at looking at and learning more about in the last week or so. And you asked specifically about outside, so I won't get too much about inside, like fold or lead tags. I was talking to someone else who emailed me this week talking about QB follow. If you really wanted, you could just make follow a tag, like if it's midline follow. Well, maybe that's not a good example. But like zone dive follow. And just have the quarterback knows that that tag means he's keeping it no matter what. But hopefully, again, that answers your question. So let's see. Let's start some of these questions that are live here. Starting at the top. Do I think going against a 4-4 is harder or easier than running the wing T? Harder or easier running the wing T? I feel like I'm barely an expert at Flexbone. More I'm just a student of it. I have not actually coached in a wing T offense. At my old school, we had one team that was sort of wing T, and if they stayed traditional wing T, they would have been better, but decided they were going to try to do pistol wing T, and it was a mess. I think both systems are very similar. You have to be disciplined. It forces the defense into bad positions. I wouldn't say anything is harder or easier on paper. A lot of times what it comes down to is matchups, where teams have their best players, where maybe you don't have your best players, I think is an easier way to look at it than whether straight up a system is better or not than a 4-4. I think a lot of teams are staying as base 4-4. It kind of feels like a cop-out answer. I don't really have a good one for you. But 4-4 gives you a lot of options. And again, that's something on that if-then spreadsheet. If you are playing a 4-4 team, you can run over, and you always have an extra man to the play side, or you just run backside, and being able to influence what they're doing and where their free safety is cheating to. And I would assume it's the same thing with a wing T. If you're a wing T coach and I'm completely wrong, I'm sorry. Maybe add a comment to the video. But that's as much as I can speak to on that. From Dwayne, what formations work well for 6U? If we're talking 6-year-olds, just regular base. I know in Madison, where I started coaching, they didn't even let you choose what formations you had. You were always double tight, double wing. I think anything out of shotgun or pistol for 6-year-olds is going to be too much. So really just base. Get really good at a few things. Don't overload 6-year-olds. I think that's just asking for trouble. If you as a coach are asking a bunch of really hard football concepts on a 6-year-old and then they don't like playing and they wind up stopping to play football to go play soccer or something, that's not good. So keep it easy. Keep it simple. From Mitch asks, do I carry rocket and jet? Is it worth carrying both? We do not carry both rocket and jet. We stick with rocket. We really like rocket. We can do a lot of things off of rocket. Jet, one is a separate motion. Very rarely do we motion our A-backs across the formation, straight across, and not back into the backfield. If you were doing any type of pistol any type of flexbone play calling out of the pistol, I like jet more than rocket out of the pistol because it's really easy and you can run all your fakes off of it. But in a traditional under center flexbone, it's hard for the quarterback, and either the A-back has to bow on his motion, or your quarterback can't really fully turn And if he does turn to hand the ball off, he's got his back to the defense. So if your center gets blown up, it's bad. I could be convinced if you really like a jet series that it could be worth it. But for me, that's an extra thing that you have to coach. It's a completely different blocking scheme for a lot of teams. Frankly, our A-backs are fast, but not burners. So if you have a really fast kid and that's your best way to get him to the edge, I could see that as a reason to run it. But we don't carry both rocket and jet. All right. So from Bryce, asking about advice on the passing game for a quarterback who does not have a big arm. So this is something that is really fun. In my younger days, and by younger days I mean like back when I played Madden, I used to love passing the ball, right? I thought that was like how you won football games. And then you realize that very quickly, well, maybe it was at the first school I coached at, but like we didn't have huge offensive linemen, so passing the ball wasn't an option. So we had to get really good at short passes. So first things first, all of your passes, let me back up. I feel like I can go on a huge diatribe here, and I keep playing with this Lego man in my hands. First things first, you do not need to have a lot of passing plays. You don't need to have a lot of passing concepts. You don't need to, I don't know. Some people make the passing game way too hard out of the Flexbone. You could get away with like 3 to 4 passing plays. I think some people would argue you could probably take less than that. The reason being, and we talked a little bit about the if-then sheet, you want to pass for a reason, right? You don't just pass just to pass, right? Like just because it's 3rd and long doesn't mean you need to pass the ball, right? Sometimes mid-triple is a better 3rd and long play, or 3rd and, right, call it 3rd and 8, 3rd and 7, than a pass might be, because everyone's expecting pass on 3rd down. So you should always have probably one deep play to like take a shot, right? Or, Hail Mary type end of the game, you need something deep. Your other plays should be play action passes that look like your other plays in how they're blocked. So what I mean by that is, let's see, we were talking about switch blocking earlier, right? So if we're switch blocking, he's going to go like that. Our A-back's going to go like that. But instead of blocking, look, this now becomes a nice little post wheel that if you get a good fake here and get the corner, free safety, anyone to take a bad step, one of these guys is going to be open. Post wheel for me is my absolute favorite route combination. It is so hard to defend, and the amount of times as a coach that I have been on the sideline screaming wheel, 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 wheel as a defensive coach is too many, because it's really hard and it forces the cornerback to be disciplined. And most cornerbacks at the high school level are not. Outside of that, what I like to do, what other concepts are there? A smash concept is pretty common. Have your X run, it's usually about, 7, 6, or 8 to 6 maybe, yard hitch here. Run a flag with your A-back. This is putting the corner. It's a one-read pass for your quarterback. If the cornerback keeps going back on the corner, throw the hitch, which a lot of times out of an 8-man front, if they're in cover 3, that's what he's going to be doing. If there's 2 safeties, maybe they're in a cover 3, or if they're in man, whatever, and he doesn't have a deep third that he's responsible for, and he carries the hitch, well, now you can throw it right over his head, and that's a touchdown. those are two really good concepts, especially for a quarterback that doesn't have a great arm. If you wanted to get into more air raid stuff, you could look like I like a good mesh concept where, any two receivers on opposite sides. Some people might run this with A-backs, others might run it with one A-back and an X. But he's going to drag here and he's going to drag here. You establish who's high, who's low. They can almost I think I've read in practice, you have them high five as they pass each other. And it almost becomes a rub route for them. I don't recommend that. I haven't seen a lot of Flexbone teams do that, but if you're looking for something different, it is something that is a possibility. Other options would be levels concepts. So as a levels concept, maybe I'll bring this guy in. So levels are going to be your ideas. You've probably got two defenders over here, so you want to put three defenders or three guys at three different levels. So your X might run a corner. My A-back might run an out. And then maybe after I play action pass, my A-back is going to run a flare. Some people might call that something different. But ideally, if these two have to defend these three, throw to the open one. Don't be worried about this check down. The biggest thing here is making sure it's a forward pass. You don't want to get in a situation where that's a lateral. So work with your quarterback to either get enough depth or work with your A-back to push up on that. That's a good passing concept for a less than physically gifted quarterback. Other options here would be screens. One of my favorite screens out of this offense would be out of Rocket. And forgive me, ignore the defense here. They're just kind of there. But a Rocket is really easy, right? Have your quarterback fake Rocket. On Rocket, your B-back is going backside. So he should pretend to block and then kind of turn around right here. Your quarterback fakes the Rocket, drops back, waits for the defense to get to him. Usually will release both of these guys, 1001, 1002, release them to the outside. Once the defense comes in, hopefully no one sits on the screen, throw to the B-back. B-back should yell release so the linemen know they can go upfield, and that's your screen. Otherwise, a few more passing concepts. This is fun. No one's asked me about passing in a while. Let's see. So out of this base formation here, if you're facing, and this goes as a good cover 4-4 defense to beat, a lot of teams will play their corners. If their corners are sitting at 7 or 8 yards, God forbid they're at 10. If you watched old Notre Dame, by old, I mean old for me, so let's see, the Brady Quinn, Jeff Samardzija era. If I see that corner 7 yards off, I am having my quarterback take the snap and throw to this guy. 1 yard step, have the X take 1 step so that corner gets in his back pedal. 1 step, turn to the ball, take your 4 or 5 yards, and just march down the field until that corner comes down. And your other options are bubbles. You can run a few different types of bubbles. We talked about this a little earlier. If I'm running this out of, say, trips, depending on how they run this, right, you could easily, depending on how these guys are aligned, right, block here, throw this bubble to this guy. He's got one man to beat to the outside. Don't look to put your guys in a lot of really hard positions. If your running game is working, right, stick to the running game. If your running game isn't working, your passing game is probably not going to carry you. But throw on downs they're not expecting. Run on downs they are expecting. And put your quarterback in a good position. You can do some more trick plays, right? Like if you wanted to run like a rocket pass, right? Pitch the ball to the A-back coming around and then throw to a wide open guy, right? 15 yards downfield. Navy just did that. I put up the Kansas State bowl game video a few hours ago. That would be one way to do it. I had another, what was I going to talk about? I don't remember. Make sure your play actions are good. If you're running it off of, say, a triple action, a lot of teams don't guard the B-back or the A-back after you fake to them. So if you fake pitch it to the A-back and then drop back from rocket, most teams just forget that A-back exists. Going out of a regular inside veer, faking that, a lot of teams just ignore the B-back. Like there's no one responsible for him. So it's taking advantage of that. Oh, that's what I was going to talk about. At my old school in Madison, that I will not name, a concept that works really well. This is if you wanted to take a little bit further of a shot against a one-high team. I really like a simple post-post, right? So have this guy run a post in front of the free safety, have this guy run a little bit longer post behind the free safety, and force that free safety to have to make a decision, which goes for a lot of your route combinations. Make it easy for your quarterback, right? One read, right? Is the free safety carrying the first post or the second post? Throw it to the other guy. With smash, is he carrying the corner route or is he jumping on the hitch? Throw to the other guy. Your quarterback, especially at a youth, anything lower than a high school varsity, is not going to make a 3 progression like drop back, right? Give him one read. If he can make the throw, great. If not, eat it, run it, whatever. Give him a safety valve. All kinds of things you can do. All right. So hopefully, Bryce, that helped a little bit. I think I did a video on play action passing. I did a video on, I forget what else I've done. Oh, 4 verts. How did I almost go through a question about passing and not talk about 4 verts? So the whole reason this defense works, and you know what? Our next question is on a 4-4, so I'm going to fix this up for a second. So traditionally a 4-4 defense, let's call him... We'll call him an end. Most teams will play a 3 and a 1, and we'll just call him that. So that's going to put him at a, hold on, 3 is going to be, he's going to be on outside here. Let's call this guy an end out here. And then we're going to have backers in 20 techniques, and then we're going to have backers out here. Typically, they're called, they can be called spinners, spinnakers. I've heard they can be called all kinds of things. But your outside backers who, depending on if you look at them as backers or free safeties, this is a 4-4 or a 4-2-5. So the reason I wanted to talk about 4 verts against this is if we're talking, usually if a team is in this shell, right, 1/3, 2/3, 3/3. So they're in deep thirds. So we can send 1 vertical, 2 vertical, 3 vertical, 4 vertical. Just like every other play, this free safety, especially I would work with your quarterback, whatever his dominant side is, right? So if he's right-handed, so when he's dropping back on his normal drop back, he can look at him. Drop back, stare at this vertical. And what that's going to do is that's going to cause that free safety to be like, I'm going to get that interception. What he's not going to see is this guy going vertical behind him. Quarterback sets his feet, turns his shoulders, hits this guy with absolutely no one behind him. 4 verts is good. as a coach, sometimes you get away from it because it seems kind of silly and it does take away a guy out of pass protection. But at least once a game, especially, maybe after a turnover or another big play and you're like, screw it, let's take a shot. This is a good take a shot play. Because worst comes to worst, like your worst case scenario is your quarterback overthrows the ball and it's incomplete. And then it's just like any other pass. So that, I think, concludes my diatribe on passing. And then going over, okay, so Tyler's asking about the 4-4. That's why I set this up. So in our 4-4 defense, 4 down linemen, 4 linebackers, whether you want to call them linebackers, whether you want to call them safeties, it doesn't matter to me. Typically, and again, doing these videos, I realize how much I say typically. I need to find another word. Teams are going to put you in a 3 and a 1 here. So 3 technique is this. If you don't know defensive line techniques, that's okay. And a 1 is going to be inside shade, right, of your center. This goes to your if-then play calling. I want to run midline to this side, right, because my A gap is open. And I want to run triple to this side because my B gap is open. I think I've talked about this before. Let's say we come up to the line. This is what we get. And we have triple right called. Right. We don't want to run triple to this side. You can, typically, but triple would be a lot better to this side. Having an option for your quarterback to come up to the line and flip the play, whether that's over, whether that's reverse, whether it's riverside. I've heard all different things teams call it. But that tells all your players, hey, the play call was triple right. Now we're going triple left. That would be one thing. In this, if you are running triple, I should have done that differently. All right, let's delete those. So, if I'm going against a true 4-4, and this is what they're giving me, you're going to see cover 3 most of the time. Most teams in high school aren't good enough to run man coverage out of this. That means that these guys are responsible for the flats. So putting them in a bad situation is always good. This is where you can use formations like we talked about earlier. So if we're running triple, right, we can run triple, right? Triple would be number 1, number 2 to that side, number 1, number 2 to this side. If we're running midline, right, we can run midline to this guy. Here's our unblocked. I like mid-triple always, right, because then you can flank and get this guy if he comes down on midline. Let's see. I don't know what else about 4-4. You should be able to run almost anything you want. This goes to your play calling. Right? You should always run triple. Always run triple, triple, triple. Look at what happens on how teams are stopping it. Right? Like some teams might give you 2 22s, like both D linemen head up on your guards. Some teams might give you, I don't think I've ever seen 2 1s. You might get 2 3s though. Right, so if you see 2 3s, especially if you're getting them to the outside, right, this should be money. I might almost just QB sneak this straight up the middle. But you should have just about your full accompaniment of plays out of this. 4-4 doesn't stop us from really doing anything. If you're having trouble, this goes with anything, but it does happen to the 4-4 depending on, right, like if these guys are in 22s, they might do some gap exchanging where, one play the tackle might go this way and the backer will go this way. The next, play, maybe the tackle comes inside and the backer plugs here. If you're having trouble with run-throughs, having trouble with blitzes, rocket's usually your answer, right? If they're going to play games and they're going to commit 6, 7 guys into the box to stop the inside run, then, right, have him catch the ball about here and set everything else up to run rocket. There are some times where with blitzes or D-lines or splits, whatever, sometimes if your offensive line just isn't playing well, no play you call is going to save you. But I think that should be an answer. If there's anything else off of a 4-4, Tyler, let me know. And I can go over it. And Bryce, can I watch the video? I'm always happy. Again, I'm going to regret making this offer. But typically, I'm always happy to watch film. When I have time, I do have a day job, unfortunately. But between quarantine and the summer and whatever else is going on, I'm usually happy to give some feedback on video, especially if there are things you want me to watch. Email is usually the best way to get a hold of me for that. If anyone has any other, that's an answer is yes. I can watch some video, and if anyone else wants to, I'm always happy to answer questions via email as well. coachacarrick@gmail.com. I've put it up a few times. But I think that's it for today. I don't see any other questions coming through. So yeah, we've done a lot of play stuff. In the future, again, I don't know how often I'm going to do these, but everything from coaching career stuff to program stuff to equipment. Well, I don't know how much I know about equipment. But I'm happy to talk about anything. I can sit here and ramble. And if not, usually when someone asks me a question I don't know, I'm going to go do the research or talk to my head coach or other coaches I've coached with. So, don't feel like you're stuck to just Flexbone stuff. Coaching's kind of what I love to do, so always happy to help out. I've had a lot of teams reach out that are going to start running Flexbone stuff. I'm always happy to help with install. We can talk practice stuff. So we'll call it a day. Man, I've been ranting for like almost an hour. So this has been fun. Appreciate you guys stopping in, and I'll let you know when the next one is. So take care, and I'll be able to put this and edit this, so it should be on YouTube for people that are watching later. All right, hit subscribe, all that other normal YouTube garbage that people say, and talk to you later.